Our distant ancestors first settled along the banks of rivers. That's what we think because those were the easiest places to live. Rivers provided water, rich soils for farming, and a means of transportation. But every now and then, these life-giving rivers would turn against their human neighbors. Floods would sweep through settlements, wiping people and animals away in a surging torrent. It's almost impossible to imagine today because the areas that are now southern Turkey, northern Syria, and northeastern Iraq were not very populated. They were dry, too dry for most of us. But back then it was an altogether different story. People lived there in large numbers, and we know this because around 1750 BC, one of the worst floods in recorded history devastated the region, destroying everything in its path. This isn't just some obscure footnote in a dusty history book. This is the stuff of legend. It's the subject of the world's first great epic poem, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And we have tablets dating back thousands of years that preserve parts of it. We can read them here in the British Museum. According to the Epic of Gilgamesh, torrential rains fell for 7 days and nights, inundating the whole earth. Only the hero Utnapishtim survived by building a boat. He and his family and pairs of every kind of animal repopulate the world after the waters receded. Does this sound familiar? Well, if you're thinking of the story of Noah, you're onto something. The biblical account in Genesis has many similarities to the story of Utnapishtim. Like him, Noah warned his contemporaries about an impending flood. Unlike Noah, he didn't listen and they all drowned except for Noah and his family and 2 of every kind of animal. Once again, though, unlike Noah, the animals weren't saved because of some divine mandate. It happened because he was a good and righteous man. In other words, he was a nice guy who happened to be in the right place at the right time and had the foresight to build a boat. And this may seem like a curious detail, but it tells us everything we need to know about how ancient people viewed the natural world. To them, these were events guided by gods, but they were also rooted in reality. Ancient people did not live in a world without disaster. They lived in a world full of disasters. They understood the power of nature and they respected it. But how much of this is mythology and how much is real history? Separating the two is difficult because the geological evidence has long since been washed away. But we do have some clues, including the Black Sea. It's now the world's largest enclosed body of salt water, and it lies between Georgia, Russia, and Turkey. Scientists believe that around 4,000 years ago, it was actually a freshwater lake. Then the freshwater lake became salty when it flooded. This is not mythology. We can see the geological evidence in layers of sediment deposited at the bottom of the sea. But the question is, could this have caused a great flood? Well, we don't know. It could have contributed to one. But according to some estimates, the amount of water involved was only about 200 cubic kilometers, which is enough to cover the entire Mesopotamian basin in about a meter of water. That's enough to cause serious flooding, but probably not enough to destroy everything in its path. So perhaps the Great Flood was a series of events that happened over hundreds or even thousands of years. Maybe it wasn't a single catastrophic event. We just don't know because, unfortunately, this is where geology stops being able to help us. What we do know is that in the centuries that followed, stories of the Great Flood spread throughout Mesopotamia and beyond. Versions of it turned up in India, China, Greece, and Rome. It appears in the Bible and the Quran. It's a universal story with roots that reach back into prehistory. We don't know exactly why so many cultures independently came up with the same story, but it doesn't really matter because that's not what this is about. The Great Flood wasn't just a random event. It was a catastrophe so terrible that our ancestors never forgot it. It became part of their collective memory, and that memory shaped their religions and their myths. Floods don't just wipe out cities. They wipe out memories. They wash away whole civilizations. But people still remember. We remember the Great Flood not because we want to dwell on the past, but because forgetting the past would be even worse. You might think of us as modern, technologically advanced humans who live in a world without catastrophes. But the truth is, we all carry the memory of the Great Flood in our genes. It's a shared inheritance that reminds us of our small place in the grand scheme of things. I'm the host of a science show. We've just done a short video on the Great Flood, but if you want to learn more about the history of floods, you should check out our video on the largest flood in recorded history. It's available right now on another platform. Now this video has been brought to you with the help of a digital studio and a research institution. Their scientists and high-performance computing facilities help us visualize everything from super volcanoes to space photography to deep-sea corals and everything else in between. This helps us tell stories that are both profoundly insightful and irresistibly visual. So thanks for watching and thanks for learning with us.